The giant meeting room of the Galactic Council looked like a circus today, Daeho Kim thought as he walked through the massive doors. His black diplomatic suit was perfectly clean and pressed just like always. His face wore the same gentle smile that had made humans famous across 47 different worlds for being nice and easy to work with. Behind him, Captain Minji Park carried a thick folder full of papers and data chips. Her brown hair was pulled back in a neat style, and her green uniform had no wrinkles anywhere. She looked calm, but inside her stomach was doing flips. This meeting would decide if humans got to keep their new colonies or if they would lose everything they had worked. Fourth meeting room was huge with a ceiling so high you could barely see it. Floating platforms held seats for delegates from every major species in the galaxy. The air smelled like a mix of different alien scents, some sweet, some sour, and some that made humans want to hold their breath. The lighting was dim because most alien species liked it. That Wedeho found his assigned seat in the human section and sat down carefully. He had been doing this job for 20 years and knew exactly how to act. His hands stayed folded in his lap, and his back stayed straight. He nodded politely to the alien delegates around him, even though some of them looked at him like he was dirt on their shoes. Minji sat beside him and quietly arranged her papers. She had been a soldier before becoming a diplomat, and sometimes Daeho could see that old training in the way she moved. Her eyes constantly scanned the room, checking exits and watching for threats. It was a habit from her military days that she could never quite shake. The other human delegates took their seats in the small section reserved for their species. Compared to the massive areas given to older civilizations, the human section looked tiny and unimportant. Lieutenant Jaewon Lee sat behind Daeho, ready to help with anything needed. He was young and still believed that being nice to everyone would solve all problems around them. The alien delegates made their various sounds of greeting. Clicks, chirps, roars, and buzzes filled the air as different species talked to each other in their own languages. The universal translators worked hard to keep up, but sometimes missed the subtle insults being thrown around. The reptilian dominion had the biggest section in the room. Their green, scaly delegates sat on heated platforms that kept their cold blood warm. Elder Vorthak was their leader, and he was the size of a small building. His yellow eyes looked at the human section with obvious disgust. He had ruled his people for 300 years and thought all younger species were basically pets. Next to them sat the crystalline collective. Their bodies looked like living gemstones that sparkled in the dim light. They communicated by changing colors and making musical sounds that hurt human ears. They controlled the richest mining systems in the galaxy and never let anyone forget it. The Hive Confederation took up another large section, but they were harder to count because they all looked exactly the same. Each delegate was part of a group mind that stretched across dozens of worlds. They moved together like they were dancing and never seemed to disagree about anything. Their clicking mandibles made constant noise. The Void Hunters sat apart from everyone else in the darkest corner of the room. Their black armor made them look like living shadows, and their red eyes glowed in the darkness. They were the galaxy's most feared warriors and had conquered more worlds than any other species. They rarely spoke, but when they did, everyone listened. Smaller species filled the remaining seats, but they rarely got to talk during important meetings. They had learned long ago that the big four species made all the real decisions. Everyone else just voted however they were told to vote. Deep gong sound echoed through the chamber, and all the noise stopped instantly. The council speaker floated up to the center platform on anti-gravity tech that was older than human civilization. The speaker was from a species that had given up physical bodies long ago and now existed as pure energy in a containment suit. Today, we gathered to discuss the Terran expansion dispute, the speaker announced in a voice that came from everywhere at once. The human colonies in sectors 7 through 12 are claimed by multiple species. This council will decide their fate. Adea felt his heart rate increase slightly, but his face showed nothing. He had practiced this expression in mirrors for years until it became automatic. Beside him, Minji shifted slightly in her seat, and he could tell she was getting ready for a fight, even though this was supposed to be a peaceful discussion. Elder Vorthak stood up first, and his massive form cast shadows across half the room. The humans have grown too comfortable, he said in a voice like grinding rocks. These worlds belong to stronger species by right of conquest. We have decided to claim them. His Words hit the human delegation like a physical blow, but none of them showed it on their faces. Deho had expected this, but hearing it out loud still hurt. These were worlds where human families had lived for decades, farms and cities and schools full of children who had never known any other home. The crystalline delegate began flashing bright colors that the translators turned into words. We require exclusive mining rights to all asteroid belts in human territory. Our scans show valuable deposits that are being wasted by primitive extraction methods. The Hive Confederation spokesman clicked his mandibles rapidly. The translation came through as we demand tribute for safe passage through our territory. Human ships have been crossing our space without proper payment for too long. Finally, the Void Hunter representative spoke in a voice like winter wind. We want the outer colonies. Human expansion ends now. Withdraw to your original systems or face the consequences. The chamber erupted in sounds that the universal translators interpreted as laughter and agreement. The alien delegates found this whole situation amusing. They saw humans as the galaxy's pet species, always polite, always helpful, always willing to give, and rather than fight. Dea stood up slowly and the chamber gradually grew quiet. He was tall for a human, but still shorter than most of the alien delegates. His voice carried clearly through the chamber's sound system. Honored delegates. He began using the formal phrases he had memorized years ago. We have prepared detailed documentation showing our peaceful settlement of these uninhabited worlds. Perhaps we could discuss compensation for any perceived inconvenience. More alien laughter filled the room. Some delegates were literally rolling on their platforms or changing colors rapidly in what passed for humor among their species. The humans were doing exactly what everyone expected, being nice and offering to pay for the privilege of keeping their own homes. Captain Minji felt something cold settle in her stomach. She had served in the Outer Rim conflicts before humanity became the galaxy's diplomats. She remembered what humans could do when politeness failed, but those days were supposed to be over. Humanity had chosen a better path, or so they had thought. Elder Vorthik leaned forward on his platform, making the metal groan under his weight. Perhaps the humans would prefer to become a protectorate species. We could manage their worlds for them and spare them the burden of making difficult decisions. The laughter got louder and more cruel. Some delegates were making gestures that didn't need translation to understand. The meaning was clear. Humans were too weak and too stupid to deserve their own worlds. Deho felt something shift deep in his chest. It was a feeling he had not experienced in decades, a cold anger that started small but grew with each insult. The careful diplomatic training that had shaped his entire career began to crack like ice under pressure. His smile never wavered. But something changed in his eyes, something that Lieutenant Jaewon noticed right away. The young officer had studied human military history, and he recognized that look. It was the same expression worn by human generals in the old war. Photographs. Minji sensed the change too. Her hand moved unconsciously toward her sidearm, not in threat, but in preparation. She had seen this look before on the faces of soldiers who had reached their breaking point. The moment when politeness stopped being enough. Distinguished delegates, Deho said, and his voice was still perfectly calm. I believe we need a brief recess to consider these generous offers. But everyone who knew him well could hear the difference. The diplomatic warmth was gone, replaced by something much colder. The galaxy was about to learn that human courtesy had always been a choice, and choices could always be changed. The recess lasted only 30 minutes, but it felt like hours to the human delegation. Deho Kim sat in the small private chamber assigned to his species, staring at the holographic display showing their disputed colonies. Each blue dot represented thousands of human lives, families who had spent decades building new worlds from empty rocks and hostile environments. Captain Minji Park paced back and forth across the narrow room like a caged animal. Her military training made it impossible for her to sit still when threats were being made against her people. She had served on the frontier worlds, had seen the farms and cities that humans had carved out of wilderness with their own hands. These aliens want to take everything we built, she said through gritted teeth. They think we are weak because we choose to be nice. They have no idea what they are asking for. Lieutenant Jaewon Lee sat at the small table reviewing the demands that had been made against humanity. The list kept growing. With each passing hour, first it was just the outer colonies, then mining rights, then tribute payments. Now, some species were demanding that humans serve as manual laborers on alien worlds, sir, he said quietly, looking up from his datapad. The Serpentine Confederacy just submitted additional demands. They want human medical technology and exclusive access to our terraforming techniques. They are treating us like we already lost this fight. Dea felt the diplomatic mask he had worn for 20 years growing heavier with each insult. The careful smile that had been his trademark across the galaxy felt like it was carved from stone. His jaw muscles ached from maintaining the pleasant expression while listening to species after species demand pieces of human civilization. The worst part was how the other aliens reacted to each new demand. They laughed and cheered like this was some kind of entertainment. They were enjoying watching humanity get cornered like a wounded animal, they thought. It was funny to see the galaxy's most polite species finally getting what they deserved. Through the chamber walls, they could hear the alien delegates celebrating in their own meeting areas. The sounds of clicking mandibles, buzzing wings, and roaring voices created a symphony of mockery. Each species was trying to outdo the others in coming up with new ways to humiliate humanity. A soft chime indicated that someone was requesting entry to the human chamber. Deho straightened his tie and put his diplomatic smile back in place. Come in, he said in his most professional voice. The door slid open and a small figure scurried inside. It was Ambassador Zeke from the Rodent Alliance, one of the minor species that rarely got to speak during council sessions. His fur was gray with age and his whiskers twitched nervously as he approached the human delegation. Ambassador Kim, he said in his squeaky voice, I wanted to warn you, the big four species have been meeting privately during the recess. They are planning something worse than just taking your colonies. Minji stopped pacing and turned to face the small alien. What kind of something worse? Zeke glanced around nervously as if afraid someone might be listening. They want to make an example of humanity, he whispered. They think other young species are getting too independent because they see how well humans have done. They want to show everyone what happens when you grow too fast. The blood drained from Jaewon's face. Sir, if they are planning to make an example of us, that could mean total conquest. They might not just take our colonies, they might try to take Earth itself. Deho felt something cold and hard settle in his stomach. The diplomatic training that had been drilled into him for decades said to find a compromise, to offer more concessions, to keep negotiating no matter what. But there was another voice in his head. Now an older voice that remembered what humans had been like before they became the galaxy's peacekeepers. Thank you, Ambassador Zeke, he said formally. We appreciate the warning. The small alien nodded quickly and scurried back out of the chamber, leaving the humans alone with the weight of what they had just learned. The alien powers were not just trying to steal human colonies, they were trying to destroy humanity as an independent species. Entirely. Minji sat down heavily in her chair and put her head in her hands. I joined the diplomatic corps because I thought we had found a better way, she said quietly. I thought we could solve problems without violence. I thought being nice was. Inujawan pulled up a holographic map showing human space. It was smaller than the territories controlled by the major alien powers, but it was still impressive for a species that had only been in space for 200 years. Dozens of worlds with billions of people, all depending on their diplomats to keep them safe. Sir, he said hesitantly, maybe we should contact Earth Command. They might have options that we do not know about. Dea stood up and walked to the small window that looked out over the council chambers. The alien delegates were returning to their seats, still laughing and making jokes about human weakness. They had no idea that their mockery was being heard by people who had once conquered their own planet through superior warfare. The communication panel on the wall chimed with an incoming message from Earth. The transmission was encrypted with codes that Deho had never seen before. When he activated it, the face of Fleet Admiral Dongwoo Choi appeared on the screen. Ambassador Kim, the Admiral said, without preamble, we have been monitoring the council session. Command wants you to know that we are prepared to support any decision you make regarding the current situation. Dea looked at the Admiral's face and saw something there that he recognized. It was the same cold expression that he felt growing on his own features, the same look that appeared when humans stopped being polite and started being practical. Admiral, he said carefully, what exactly does command mean by support? The Admiral smiled, but it was not a nice smile. We have assets in position throughout human space and beyond. Our diplomatic posture can change Very quickly, if required, the choice is yours, Ambassador, but know that whatever you decide, we are ready. The transmission ended, leaving the human delegation alone with a decision that would change everything. They could continue trying to be the galaxy's perfect diplomats, accepting insults and demands with patience and grace, or they could remind everyone that diplomacy was a choice, not a weakness. Outside in the main chamber, the alien delegates were taking their seats again. The next session would begin soon, and they expected the humans to cave in completely, to offer even more concessions, to beg for mercy like the weak species. They believed humanity. Tubadejo straightened his jacket and checked his appearance in the small mirror. One last time, the diplomatic smile was gone, replaced by an expression of calm professionalism that somehow looked much more dangerous. His 20 years of training in patience and courtesy had prepared him well for what came next, because sometimes the most important diplomatic skill was knowing when to stop being diplomatic. He turned to face his team. Captain Park, Lieutenant Lee, prepare for the next session, he said quietly, and send a message to Admiral Troy. Tell him that the courtesy protocol is being suspended effective immediate. Talinji and Jaewon exchanged glances. They both knew what those words meant. The careful diplomatic dance that humanity had performed for 50 years was about to end. The galaxy was about to learn that there was a very good reason why humans had been so successful at keeping the peace. They were the only species that truly understood war. The chamber doors opened, and the human delegation walked back into the council chambers. Their posture was different. Now straighter, more confident, with an energy that seemed to make the air itself feel more dangerous. The alien delegates noticed the change, but did not understand what it meant. They were about to find out. The alien delegates were still celebrating when the human delegation returned to the main chamber. They had spent the recess making jokes about human weakness and planning how to divide up human territory among themselves. The reptilian dominion wanted the agricultural worlds. The crystalline collective had already marked the mining systems on their star charts. The void hunters were discussing which human cities would make the best examples when they invaded. None of them noticed how differently the humans were walking now. Instead of the careful shuffling steps of nervous diplomats, they moved with the fluid precision of trained soldiers. Captain Minji Park no longer kept her eyes down in polite deference. Instead, she scanned the chamber like a military officer evaluating threats and planning responses. Lieutenant Jaewon Lee had activated his personal datapad and was quietly downloading files that had been classified for decades. The information streaming across his screen would have shocked the alien delegates if they had been able to read it. Fleet positions, industrial capacity, weapons technology that had been hidden behind humanitarian missions, and peaceful exploration. Ambassador Daeho Kim took his seat and placed his hands flat on the desk in front of him. The gesture looked calm and professional, but anyone who knew human body language would have recognized it as a warning sign. It was the same position human soldiers took just before they drew their weapons. Elder Vorthik stood up first, his massive reptilian form casting shadows across the chamber floor. He was eager to continue the humiliation of humanity and had prepared even more outrageous demands during the recess. The humans have had sufficient time to consider our generous offers, he rumbled in his deep voice. We expect their complete acceptance of all terms, including the new conditions we have prepared. He activated his holographic display, showing a map of human space that had been carved up like a meal. Each major alien power had claimed pieces of human territory. The remaining scraps were marked for use as labor camps and resource extraction sites. There was no place left for humans to actually live. We have decided to be merciful. Vorthik continued, the human species will be relocated to designated areas where they can serve more productive roles in galactic society. They will provide manual labor, medical services, and entertainment for their betters. The chamber erupted in alien laughter once again. The delegates found the idea of humans being used as servants absolutely hilarious. Some were making gestures that roughly translated to humans being treated like pets or livestock. Captain Minji felt something snap inside her chest. She had seen those same gestures used by slavers in the Outer Rim conflicts 20 years ago. The memory of burning colonies and captured civilians flooded back into her mind. The careful diplomatic training that had taught her to suppress Those memories suddenly seemed pointless. Ambassador Deho stood up slowly and the chamber gradually fell quiet. There was something different about his posture now, something that made even the largest alien delegates feel slightly uncomfortable. His diplomatic smile had been replaced by an expression of professional courtesy that somehow felt much more threatening. Distinguished delegates, he said, and his voice carried clearly through the chamber's sound system, we appreciate your detailed proposals. However, there seems to be some confusion about the nature of this discussion. He activated his own holographic display, and the aliens leaned forward expecting to see charts showing human surrender. Instead, they saw something that made several delegates step backward in shock. The display showed the true size and composition of the human fleet. 847 capital ships, each one larger and more advanced than anything the aliens had seen. 12,000 escort vessels that could outfight most alien battleships. 50,000 fighter craft that moved faster and hit harder than anything else in known space. But that was not the most shocking part. The display also showed the deployment positions of these ships. They were not gathered around Earth in a defensive formation. They were spread throughout the galaxy, positioned near every major alien system, ready to strike at a moment's notice. The mathematical breakdown was even more terrifying. Human industrial capacity produced more warships in a single month than most alien civilizations possessed in their entire fleets. Human technology was decades ahead of what the aliens had assumed. The humans had been building this military force for 50 years. While everyone thought they were just peaceful explorers, Elder Vorthak stared at the display, his yellow eyes wide with shock. That is impossible, he hissed. Your species has no military tradition. You are diplomats and peacekeepers, not warriors. Deho smiled, but it was not the gentle expression the aliens were used to seeing. It was the cold smile of a predator that had been playing with its food. That is where you are mistaken, he said calmly. We are not naturally peaceful, Elder Vorthak. Peace is something we chose to pursue after we became very good at war. The display changed, showing archive footage from humanity's pre-contact period. Cities burning under orbital bombardment, armies moving across devastated landscapes with mechanical precision, fleets of ships darkening entire star systems, the systematic efficiency with which humans had conquered their own world before turning their attention to the stars. Before we met the rest of the galaxy, Deho continued, we spent 3,000 years perfecting the art of warfare. We conquered our entire planet not through superior numbers but through superior strategy, technology, and ruthless execution. We became so good at destroying things that we nearly destroyed ourselves. The alien delegates sat in stunned silence as more footage played, showing the true scope of human military capability. Nuclear weapons that could crack continents, biological warfare that could sterilize worlds, computer viruses that could cripple entire civilizations. Humans had developed every possible method of destruction and then improved upon them. When we finally reached the stars, we made a choice. Minji said, standing up to address the chamber. We could continue being conquerors, or we could try to be something better. We chose diplomacy over destruction, cooperation over conquest. We spent 50 years proving that civilized beings could solve problems without violence. She paused, and her voice grew harder, but that was our choice, not our nature. We did not become peaceful because we were weak. We became peaceful because we were strong enough to choose mercy over revenge. Lieutenant J1 activated another display showing current human military positions. The alien delegates could see that every major system in the galaxy was within striking distance of human forces. Trade routes that they thought were protected by their own fleets were actually under constant surveillance by human ships. We have been your peacekeepers for 5 decades, Deho said, his voice still perfectly calm. We have prevented 17 wars, mediated 43 territorial disputes, and provided disaster relief to hundreds of worlds. We did this because we believed in something better than endless conflict. The chamber was completely silent now. Every alien delegate was staring at the displays showing the true extent of human power. They had assumed humanity was weak because humans chose not to use violence. They had never considered that this restraint might be a choice rather than inability. But you have shown us that our peaceful approach is seen as weakness, he continued. That our desire to help others is viewed as stupidity. That our preference for negotiation over annihilation makes U.S. suitable targets for conquest. The final display activated, showing real-time positions of human fleets throughout the galaxy. Admiral Dongwu Choi's task force was already moving toward the disputed colonies. Other fleets were taking positions near alien homeworlds. The galaxy suddenly looked very different when viewed through the lens of human military capability, so we are making a different choice now, Deho said, and his voice carried the weight of 50 years of suppressed military tradition. The courtesy protocol that has guided human behavior since first contact is hereby suspended. The aliens finally understood what they had done. They had pushed the galaxy's most successful peacekeepers into abandoning peace they had mistaken restraint for weakness and kindness for stupidity. Now they were facing the consequences of that mistake. Humanity was still willing to be diplomatic, but now they would negotiate from a position of strength, and everyone in the chamber suddenly remembered that there was a very good reason why humans had been so successful at keeping the peace. They were the only species that truly understood what happened when peace failed. The silence in the council chamber stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Elder Vorthek stood frozen on his platform, his massive reptilian form trembling slightly as he stared at the holographic displays showing human military might. The numbers were impossible to deny. 800 capital ships was more firepower than his entire civilization had ever possessed. The crystalline collective delegates had stopped their musical communication entirely. Their gem-like bodies had turned a dull gray color that indicated extreme fear or shock among their species. This color change only happened when facing immediate extinction. The mathematical analysis they were capable of told them exactly how hopeless their situation had become. The Hive Confederation was clicking their mandibles in rapid patterns that their own translators struggled to keep up with. The group mind that connected all their individuals was processing the implications of what they had just learned. Thousands of voices across dozens of worlds were all reaching the same terrifying conclusion. Captain Minji Park stepped forward, and her movement was no longer the careful shuffle of a nervous diplomat. Instead, she moved with the fluid grace of a combat veteran who had seen real action. Her green uniform suddenly looked less like formal wear and more like a military uniform designed for function over appearance. Distinguished delegates, she said, and her voice carried none of the apologetic tone the aliens had grown accustomed to from humans. For 50 years, you have known us as your peacekeepers, your mediators, your helpful neighbors. We have been proud to serve in that role because we believed in the possibility of a better galaxy. She gestured to the displays still showing human fleet positions spread throughout known space. But today you have made it clear that our peaceful nature is seen as weakness, that our desire to help is viewed as an opportunity for exploitation, that our commitment to diplomacy makes us suitable targets for conquest. Elder Vorthek finally found his voice, though it came out as more of a croak than his usual commanding roar. This changes nothing, he said, but his words lacked conviction. Even if you have hidden fleets, you are still outnumbered. The combined might of our alliance will crush any resistance you attempt. Lieutenant Jaewon Lee looked up from his datapad with an expression that would have been frightening on any species but was particularly unsettling on a human face. Humans were not supposed to look predatory. Their features were too soft, their expressions too gentle. But the cold calculation in Jaewon's eyes reminded everyone that humans had once been apex predators on their own world. Actually, Elder Vorthek, he said in a voice that sounded almost cheerful, we have run the calculations. Your combined fleets total approximately 400 capital ships scattered across dozens of systems. Admiral Choi's task force alone contains 200 ships, all equipped with technology that is 20 years more advanced than your best weapons. The mathematical breakdown appeared on the main display, showing fleet strengths and positions throughout the galaxy. The alien delegates could see their own forces marked in red, pitiful small clusters, compared to the vast network of blue dots representing human military assets. But numbers are not the most important factor. Minji continued, the critical difference is experience. Your fleets have not fought a real war in over a century. Most of your commanders have never seen actual combat. They have only participated in ceremonial displays and parade formations. She activated another display showing human military training records. Every human, officer had completed combat simulations that were more realistic and intense than anything the alien militaries used. Human soldiers trained constantly for scenarios that the other species considered impossible. Their entire military doctrine was built around fighting enemies with superior numbers or technology. Our officers train for war every day, she said simply. Your officers train for politics and ceremony. When conflict comes, and it will come very soon, the difference will be immediately apparent. Ambassador Deho walked to the center of the chamber, and every alien delegate tracked his movement like prey animals watching a predator. The diplomatic mask he had worn for 20 years was completely gone now, replaced by the cold professional expression of someone who had made difficult decisions and lived with the consequences. The galaxy will have a choice, he announced, and his words carried the weight of absolute authority. You can accept the new reality of human strength and learn to negotiate with us as equals, or you can continue believing that our courtesy was weakness and discover just how effective human military doctrine can be. New holographic display activated, showing real-time movements of human fleets throughout the galaxy. The aliens could see ships moving into position around their homeworlds, not threateningly but with clear intent. The message was unmistakable. Humanity had the capability to strike anywhere at any time. The serpentine delegate, who had been so eager to mock humanity earlier, was now coiled tightly on his platform, his forked tongue flicking out nervously. You cannot threaten the entire galaxy, he hissed. We have alliances, treaties, mutual defense pacts. Dea smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. We are not threatening anyone, he said calmly. We are simply taking our rightful place in galactic politics. For 50 years we accepted a junior role because we believed in the value of cooperation. Now we will participate as equals because we have earned that position through strength. The Void Hunter representative leaned forward in his dark armor, his red eyes glowing brighter than usual. Even if you have the ships, do you have the will to use them? Your species has grown soft with decades of peace. You lack the killer instinct necessary for real warfare. Captain Mingji turned to face the Void Hunter, and for a moment her diplomatic composure slipped completely. The expression that crossed her face was one that had been seen on human battlefields for thousands of years. It was the look of someone who had killed before and was prepared to do it again. That is where you are wrong, she said quietly. We did not grow soft from peace. We chose peace because we understood the cost of war, but that understanding works both ways. We know exactly what we are capable of when restraint is no longer an option. The chamber fell silent again as the implications of her words sank in. The aliens had assumed that 50 years of diplomacy had made humans weak and hesitant. They had never considered that those same 50 years might have been spent preparing for the day when diplomacy failed. Lieutenant J1 stood up and activated the final display. It showed a countdown timer that had less than 6 hours remaining. Fleet Admiral Choi has been authorized to secure all disputed territories by force if necessary, he announced. The Admiral is currently awaiting orders from Ambassador Kim. All eyes turned to Deho as he stood in the center of the chamber. The fate of the galaxy suddenly rested in the hands of a man who had spent his entire career trying to avoid this exact moment. The diplomat who had prevented 17 wars was now in a position to start the largest conflict in galactic history. The choice is yours, he said, addressing the entire chamber. You can withdraw your claims against human territory and learn to treat us with the respect due to a major power, or you can maintain your current position and discover why humans were so successful at keeping the peace. The alien delegates looked around at each other with growing panic. They had pushed too hard and awakened something they did not understand. The galaxy's most successful peacekeepers were offering them one last chance to avoid a war that would reshape known space, but the offer would not remain open much longer. The countdown timer continued its inexorable march toward zero, and with each passing second the galaxy moved closer to learning what happened when humanity stopped being polite and started being practical. The age of taking advantage of human kindness was ending. Whether it would be replaced by mutual respect or mutual destruction depended entirely on what the alien delegates decided to do in the next few hours. And for the first time in 50 years, the humans did not particularly care which choice their opponents made. The countdown timer showed 4 hours and 37 minutes when the first alien Delegate Broke Elder Vorthok, who had been the loudest voice demanding human submission, now sat hunched on his platform, his yellow eyes darting between the holographic displays showing human fleet positions. The mathematics were undeniable. His entire civilization was within striking distance of human warships' fleet. Admiral Dongwu Choi appeared on the main communication screen, his image broadcast from the bridge of the human dreadnought Indomitable. The ship was massive even by human standards, and the alien delegates could see through the viewport behind him that it was surrounded by dozens of escort vessels, all moving in perfect formation toward the disputed systems. Ambassador Kim, the admiral, said in a voice that carried the authority of someone who had commanded fleets in actual combat situations. We have achieved optimal positioning in all targeted systems. Resistance forces in the disputed colonies have been neutralized and local populations secured. The alien delegates stared in shock at what they were hearing. Human forces had not just moved into position, they had already taken control of the colonies that were supposedly under dispute. The speed and efficiency of the operation was terrifying. None of their own intelligence networks had detected the movements. Captain Minji Park stood and addressed the chamber with the calm professionalism of someone reporting routine military operations. The human colonies in sectors 7 through 12 are now under full protection of the Terran Defense Force, she announced. Local alien raiding parties have been disarmed and escorted out of human space without casualties. The word "without casualties" hung in the air like a threat. The humans had demonstrated they could strike anywhere without warning, but they had chosen not to kill anyone yet. The restraint was somehow more frightening than violence would have been. It showed complete confidence and control. Lieutenant Jaewon Lee activated new displays showing the true scope of human military deployment. Fleets that had been disguised as exploration missions were revealing their true nature. Cargo ships were opening to release. Squadrons of fighters, hospital ships were deploying. Marine battalions, diplomatic vessels were uncloaking to reveal advanced weapon systems. The crystalline collective delegate finally managed to change color from gray to a pale blue that indicated desperate communication attempts. Our mining operations in those systems, she chimed in her musical voice. They represent centuries of investment and development. Ambassador Daeho turned to face her with an expression of polite interest that somehow managed to be more intimidating than any snarl. Your illegal mining operations, you mean, he said calmly, the ones that violated 16 different galactic treaties regarding territorial sovereignty. The evidence appeared on the holographic displays. Detailed records of crystalline mining operations on worlds that belonged to humanity. The aliens had been stealing resources for decades, assuming that humans were too polite to complain. The documentation was thorough, and, damn in these records, will be forwarded to the appropriate galactic courts. Daeho continued, along with bills for damages and unpaid resource extraction fees. We estimate the total amount owed to humanity at approximately 4 trillion galactic credits. The number was staggering enough to bankrupt most civilizations. The crystalline collective had been so focused on their illegal profits that they had never considered the possibility of being caught and held accountable. The Hive Confederation spokesman clicked his mandibles frantically as the group mind processed the implications of what was happening. Our trade routes through human space, he said. The tribute payments were traditional acknowledgement of safe passage rights. Actually, Lieutenant Jaewon said, consulting his datapad, those were illegal taxation schemes imposed on civilian vessels. The Galactic Commerce Code is very clear about unauthorized tolls and tribute demands. More evidence appeared showing decades of hive harassment of human merchant ships. The aliens had been systematically extorting money from human traders. While human authorities carefully documented every violation, the humans had been building a legal case while everyone assumed they were just being passive. The total amount of illegal tribute collected from human vessels comes to approximately 700 billion credits. Jaewon continued, with interest and penalties for unlawful commerce interference. The Void Hunter representative remained silent, but his glowing red eyes were darting between the displays showing human military positions. His species had built their reputation on being the galaxy's most feared warriors. Now they were facing the possibility that humans might be better at warfare than they were. Your expansion into the Outer Rim territories, Ambassador Daeho said, addressing the Void Hunter directly, Those were not empty systems as you claimed. They were human colonies that you attacked and destroyed. We have been investigating those incidents for 20 years. The final display showed the most damning evidence of all void hunter attacks on human settlements that had been covered up and blamed on space pirates. The humans had survivors, witnesses, and detailed forensic evidence. They had been quietly building a case for war crimes while maintaining diplomatic relations. The chamber was now completely silent as the alien delegates realized the full scope of their situation. They had not just awakened a sleeping giant, they had awakened a giant that had been carefully documenting every crime committed against it for decades. Fleet Admiral Troy spoke again from the communication screen. All human diplomatic facilities throughout the galaxy have been placed under military protection, he announced. Our embassy staff are being evacuated from potentially hostile territories. As a precautionary measure, the aliens understood the implication. Human diplomats were being withdrawn because humanity was preparing for the possibility of open warfare. The careful diplomatic relationships that had maintained peace for 50 years were being dissolved in real time. Captain Minji addressed the chamber one final time. The Terran Defense Force is implementing new security protocols for all human space, she said. Unauthorized military vessels will be turned away at the border. Repeat violations will be met with appropriate force. The transformation was complete. The galaxy had spent the morning dealing with weak, submissive humans who apologized for existing. Now they were facing a major military power that was calmly redistributing the balance of galactic politics through superior force. Ambassador Deho walked back to the center of the chamber, and every alien delegate watched him with the attention usually reserved for natural disasters or incoming missiles. The pleasant diplomat they had known for years was gone, replaced by someone who radiated quiet authority. The Galactic Council will now vote on the Terran expansion dispute, he announced. All in favor of recognizing human sovereignty over the disputed territories, please indicate your position. One by one, the alien delegates activated their voting systems. The choice was simple: recognize human claims or face the consequences of opposing a military force that had been planning for this moment for 50 years. Elder Vorthak was the first to vote in favor, his massive form seeming to shrink as he made his choice. The crystalline collective followed their musical tones, subdued and defeated. The Hive Confederation clicked their mandibles in resigned acceptance. Even the Void Hunter representative activated his voting system, supporting human territorial claims. His species understood strength, and they had just seen a demonstration of power that commanded respect. The vote was unanimous. The galaxy had learned that human courtesy had always been a choice, not a weakness. And when that choice was withdrawn, the alternative was not chaos or brutality, but the cold, efficient competence of a species that had mastered both war and peace. The countdown timer still showed 3 hours remaining, but it was no longer needed. The message had been delivered and received. The age of taking advantage of human kindness was officially over. The age of respecting human strength had begun. 6 months had passed since the day the Galactic Council learned what humans were truly capable of. The same chamber that had echoed with alien laughter and mockery now maintained a respectful silence. Whenever human delegates spoke, the massive meeting hall looked exactly the same, but everything about the dynamics had changed completely. Ambassador Deho Kim walked through the chamber doors wearing the same black diplomatic suit he had always preferred. His face showed the same professional expression that had made him famous throughout the galaxy, but now when he smiled, the alien delegates paid attention instead of dismissing him as irrelevant. Behind him, Admiral Minji Park wore her new uniform with quiet pride. The promotion from captain had come with new responsibilities, and she now commanded the Terran Defense Force's Diplomatic Security Division. Her presence at council sessions was no longer ceremonial. She was there to ensure that human interests were protected by any means necessary. Commander Jaewon Lee followed, carrying the same type of datapad he had always used, but the information flowing across his screen was very different now. Instead of defensive legal briefs and diplomatic compromises, he reviewed intelligence reports and fleet deployment schedules. The galaxy was more peaceful than it had been in decades, and everyone knew where the seating arrangement in the chamber had been modified over the past months. The human section was no longer a small corner tucked away behind larger delegations. Now, the Terran representatives sat at a prominent table that commanded clear sightlines to every other delegation. The message was subtle but unmistakable. Humanity was now a major power. Elder Vorthek still commanded the Reptilian Dominion delegation, but his massive form seemed diminished somehow, the confident arrogance that had once made him the Chamber's most intimidating presence had been replaced by careful respect. He had learned the hard way that size and age meant nothing when facing superior technology and training. The Crystalline Collective had restructured their entire government after the revelation of their illegal mining operations. Their new delegates were younger and more cautious individuals who understood that the old ways of exploiting weaker species were no longer viable. The galactic economy had shifted dramatically once fair trade agreements became mandatory. Rather than optional, the Hive Confederation had withdrawn from several star systems, voluntarily returning territories they had seized from smaller species over the centuries. The group mind that controlled their civilization had calculated that cooperation was far more profitable than conquest. When dealing with humans who actually enforced galactic law, even the Void Hunters had adapted to the new reality. Their raids on civilian shipping had stopped, completely replaced by legitimate military contracts and security services. The most feared warriors in the galaxy had discovered that there was more honor and profit in protecting the weak than in preying upon them. The council speaker floated to the center platform, and the chamber fell silent immediately. The energy being that had mediated galactic politics for centuries had witnessed the most dramatic shift in power in recorded history. Today we address the quarterly security report from the Terran Defense Force. Admiral Minji stood and activated her holographic display showing peaceful star charts with clearly marked patrol routes and protected shipping lanes. The past 6 months have seen a 97% reduction in piracy throughout the galaxy, she reported. Illegal territorial expansion has ceased entirely, and trade disputes have dropped to historic lows. The statistics were impressive, but everyone in the chamber understood what they really meant. Human warships were now present throughout known space, not as conquerors but as peacekeepers. The difference was that when humans offered to keep the peace, everyone knew they had the strength to enforce their offer. Unauthorized mining operations have been eliminated, she continued with professional satisfaction. Resource extraction now follows proper galactic protocols with fair compensation to planetary owners. The Crystalline Collective has made full restitution for past violations and has become a model of ethical business practices. Several alien delegates shifted uncomfortably at the mention of restitution. The bills for decades of illegal activities had bankrupted some civilizations and forced others to completely restructure their economies. The humans had been patient about payment plans, but absolutely firm about accountability. Commander Jaewon stepped forward to address the trade statistics. Galactic commerce has increased by 43% since the implementation of standardized security protocols. He announced shipping insurance costs have dropped by 60% due to reduced piracy and the elimination of unauthorized tribute collection. The economic transformation had been as dramatic as the military one. Once smaller species no longer had to worry about being exploited or attacked. They had begun trading and expanding at unprecedented rates. The galaxy was experiencing a golden age of prosperity, largely because everyone now felt safe enough to conduct business. Ambassador Daeho rose to address the chamber, and the alien delegates gave him their complete attention. His words now carried the weight of the galaxy's strongest military and most successful economy. Distinguished colleagues, he began. The Terran Defense Force is pleased to report that galactic peace remains stable. The term galactic peace had taken on new meaning over the past months. It no longer meant the absence of conflict. It meant the presence of someone strong enough to prevent conflict from starting. The humans had become the galaxy's police force, not through conquest, but through demonstrated competence. However, he continued, we must address some concerning intelligence reports. Several fringe systems have reported the presence of unknown vessels conducting raids against isolated colonies. These attackers appear to be using technology and tactics unfamiliar to our databases. A new threat was emerging from beyond the edges of known space, something that had not yet learned the new rules of galactic politics. The alien delegates exchanged worried glances, remembering What had happened to the last groups that had underestimated human capabilities? The Terran Defense Force is deploying additional patrol units to investigate these incidents. Deho announced we will also be establishing new forward bases to extend our protective coverage to previously undefended systems. Any species wishing to contribute vessels or personnel to this effort will be welcomed as partners. The